What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what the news is saying about Tesla, what data is coming out that's very important, and why tomorrow is going to be a very big day for the markets because we have millions and millions of options expiring with a big Opex expiration date, and it's going to be very important for the market. Before I break anything down all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention two things real quick. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with the market. So Tesla was down 3.81% for the day, taking a bit of a beating. And this is because of some bad news that came out from three different places. First off, we had some news in Sweden that came out, which I'm going to talk about in just a couple of minutes. Also, some news involving President Joe Biden and Xi Jinping, the president of China, who met and discussed something. And finally, we had the news involving Elon Musk that came out. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I will mention just a couple of things. So before I talk about that, let's talk about the market as a whole first before we break down Tesla. For the market for tomorrow, we have some very minor pieces of data tomorrow morning. We have some housing data in the morning. Then we have just a bunch of Fed speakers. We have Barr, Collins, Daly, and then another Fed speaker throughout the day tomorrow. And that's pretty much it. Nothing too crazy on the data side. However, for earnings, I think we have Ross coming out in just a couple of minutes. And besides that, there's nothing else that's too big for Friday. And then when it comes to the data or like the options chain data, this is where things become very important. Okay. We have over 1.3 million calls expiring tomorrow, and we have over 3 million puts expiring, with 433 being max pain. The puts to call ratio is 2.3, and this is going to be very important. So, honestly, guys, whether or not we get one more pump in the markets or if we see the market tank because of this will depend on what the market makers wants to do. And in order to determine this, you want to be watching some key levels on SPY, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. Now, if I was a market maker and I wanted to, squeeze more shorts, I could push the market higher, and there's always a possibility of that. But what would be a slightly more advantageous move would be if they actually drop the markets closer to max pain. Technically, not always a guarantee, though. It all depends on what these market makers want to do. If I was a market maker, okay, if I was the one who was controlling the markets, I would want to see SPY get a little closer to max pain, maybe drop it a bit, because if you look at the chart, we have way more in the money calls than out of the money calls. And if you could just sacrifice some of these winning positions and you basically allow some of these puts to get in the money and more of these calls to go from in the money to out of the money, you could have a better position. Overall, it doesn't really matter though, because the market makers are still well ahead. Over 3 million puts are out of the money. So it all depends on what they want to do, guys. I really don't know what they're going to do. It depends on their level of manipulation and what they try to pull off. Will they pump the markets, or are they going to cause the market to sell off? We'll just have to wait and see. But for Tesla, we had some negative news that came out. The first one is what I discussed in the morning. If you want more details about this, you could just go to my morning video. But basically, in Sweden, we're seeing the blockades just continuing, and more of the protests and these moves by the unions just continuing to affect Tesla. So this is important because many cleaners are going to stop cleaning the Tesla showrooms. We're going to see electricians refusing to fix the company's charging points, and dock workers are starting to refuse to unload Tesla cargo at all Swedish ports. Now that is getting more and more important, and this is something that Tesla has to address as soon as possible. So they want a collective agreement from both sides. We're going to be listening to see what they want specifically. We're going to be looking for more benefits, more like pay raises and things like that. And this trend is continuing across the globe. We're seeing other parts of the world where we're seeing this as well. So far it's affecting Tesla. We'll see if anything else comes out. There's also some news involving President Joe Biden. Basically, Biden went to the summit and he met with President Xi Jinping of China, and they discussed some very important matters. They agreed to allow for direct communications between their militaries, but whether or not that's like legitimate or not could depend. I don't fully trust everything that comes from those ends. But at the same time, there is nothing that was mentioned about ongoing tax and tariffs in place between the US and China. And this is something investors were really hoping for. So these tariffs are going to have an effect on companies like Tesla, companies affiliated with China and shipping parts from China. And that's going to be very important for Tesla. So, because there was no development, this led to a lot of tickers, especially Chinese ones, to sell off quite a bit. We saw NEO sell off, we saw others following the trend, and this added to the downwards pressure on Tesla. We didn't really get confirmation of this uncertainty, whether or not this is going to continue. And that was some negative news. And then on top of all of that, there was some news involving Elon Musk. I'm not going to talk specifically about what was said. I don't really want to do it on this channel. I just want to note that sometimes Elon Musk could say things that are very contentious. Sometimes he may say things that are not entirely correct. Maybe he can, misspeak sometimes. Who knows? But the bottom line is, let's not worry about that part. Let's just talk about the result of what Elon Musk said. He said something on Twitter. You could argue all you want about whether or not he's right or wrong, whether it's like media bias getting in the way from the truth or not. That doesn't matter. What matters is there's controversy. There are people arguing about this. People are just disagreeing, and it's not really helping Tesla's image. It's not helping Elon Musk. He was supposed to be a big speaker at another like Asian summit that was supposed to come out, and they've just removed him from the list. So his words sometimes work against Tesla and his own reputation. He wants to say what he wants, and I respect that. I respect his right to have freedom of speech, as he's an advocate for it too. At least he claims to be, and it's awesome. But at the same time, it affects Tesla. It affects him. It's caused Tesla's reputation to be tarnished amongst some viewers because many people have negative views towards Musk and Tesla now. And the truth is, this is not good for any company. It's not good for any company to have a CEO that does this. I still respect him. I still think he's done an amazing job. I just wanted to note that he does say controversial things, and sometimes there's going to be a big reaction to it. And we saw part of that in Tesla for today. All right. So Tesla selling off was not solely because of Elon Musk. There were other factors that played a role, but we're going to be watching to see if his words still affect Tesla going into tomorrow, and the same thing with the other factors. Now, looking at Tesla, we saw some high volume selling, 136 million. That's well above average. And there are other things affecting it as well. We can see the short volume is still at this relatively high place at about this like 51% area. If it goes a little higher, we could see more shorting on Tesla. Nothing else is changing in terms of this data. The price-price ratio is dropping, though, as Tesla's losing some strength. And on top of all of this, Fridays tend to be green only about 48.8% of the time. It's almost 50-50, but not the strongest. Watch for more volatility during the second hour of the day at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time and also around 2 p.m. During those hours, we see the most hourly seasonality, more volatility during those periods. And besides that, the financial estimates remain the same. Everything else is still decent for Tesla's long term. For the short term, these pieces of news that have come out are still negatively affecting Tesla. So what do I see for the share price for tomorrow? What do I think is going to happen? This is going to depend on Opex. What does Opex cause for the markets? What do these options expirations do to like SPY and also the QQQ and the NASDAQ? What do the market makers plan? Whatever they plan could still affect Tesla. As of right now, Tesla's relatively weak. So, Tesla could still show weakness regardless of that. So what does this mean? Basically, going into tomorrow, we might see Tesla attempt to rebound just a little bit. We're going to be watching to see if it could retest 235. To turn bullish, you want to see it get above 235 and start pushing for 238 plus. If it gets above 238, I think it's going to turn bullish and start pushing up for 242. That's going to be like this imbalance fill up here towards like 240 if we get above 238. However, Tesla's barely at 231 during the after hours. If we do get a small rebound or not, that's going to depend on what the market does and also if Tesla could see some buyers' attempts to defend it. But we have a very critical support on Tesla you have to be watching for. So when you look at Tesla, look at the 4-hour time frame. You're going to be noticing that we have the 200 EMA basically at this 231 area. This might actually drop a bit more towards like 230. And also on the daily time frame, it happens to be around this like 230 flat area. So the daily 200 EMA is at 230.8, I'm sorry, 230.08. So we're going to be watching that. That's actually very close to where gap support happens to be. On the daily chart, Tesla has this big gap down to 224, the 224 area. So honestly, guys, if we lose 230, okay, if Tesla's bearish and we break that support, we have some support at 231 and also 230. If we lose it, there's going to be a risk of Tesla filling the gap and coming all the way down to at least 225.68, if not 224 to fill the gap. So I'm going to anticipate a bigger drop if we end up losing support. And we're going to be watching to see how the market ends up moving, which is going to affect Tesla. If the whole market tanks tomorrow because of Opex, there's always that possibility, right? That could lead to Tesla selling off more aggressively because Tesla is relatively weak right now. Meaning, if SPY is up, right, 1%, okay, and Tesla is up like 6%, it's relatively strong because its beta tends to be above 2.0, which means if SPY is down, for example, 0.5%, Tesla could be down 3%, 4%, well above that 2% typical range. And that's what I mean by relative strength and relative weakness. So right now, Tesla is relatively weak. If the market falls, Tesla may fall harder. So you want to be very prepared for that. You just want to be careful. All right. So we're going to be watching these levels. Tesla has not officially broken the 200 EMA on the daily time frame, so we can't turn extremely bearish yet until we get that break. So we'll be watching that test going into tomorrow. If we rebound and we fail at 235 or so, and we just fail and we just end up going down to 230 and we fail here, we're going to turn very bearish, and there is a risk of that happening as Tesla's looking very weak. If that happens, watch for 225. But if Opex is giving the market a nice balance and we see the market makers try to push the market higher and there's manipulation, then there's always the possibility of us trying to get above 238 to turn bullish. Right now, this possibility is looking a bit more likely. The red trend line I have drawn out here, this looks a little bit more likely. Looking at how weak Tesla's looking. So just to be safe, we'll see what happens on the news tomorrow, and we'll see if Tesla continues to break some key support. So don't assume we're going to break down to 225 yet. Wait and see if we lose support right here, this 200 EMA. That's going to be your key for tomorrow. All right, so watch support just to be safe. On SPY, this is very boring. Now, looking at the chart on the daily time frame especially, we had a very, very interesting looking structure. The daily Bollinger Bands were showing that this thing was very overbought and this thing had some tight resistance coming, right? But the thing about that is the market is not necessarily budging just yet. We came down today and we saw the buyers defend again and the market closed pretty flat. So we had basically 3 very flat days. The first day we were started off kind of low and pumped and remained flat. Next day was very flat, and then yesterday was flat alongside today. Market's very flat, it's not really doing much, very indecisive. So I'm presuming we may stay in our range, and then we're going to be watching, which way we break in the range to determine which way we're going to go. So what does this mean? SPY has this head and shoulders like pattern that is still technically existent, okay? We haven't invalidated this just yet, which means there is technically a possibility it breaks down, but this could always be a trap because of the market makers on Opex. So what should you be watching for? It's very simple. We have this head and shoulders, there's a risk of downside. If we break 452, we invalidate this head and shoulders and we're going to turn bullish, and those market makers are going to start squeezing more shorts if SPY breaks 452 going into tomorrow. Okay, so listen to that very, very carefully. If 452 breaks, we turn bullish. This thing is going to be pushing for 435.5 and maybe even, 453.5 and then 456. If we're bearish, we want to see this thing lose 448. If we lose 448, we turn bearish, and we're going to be watching for 446.5. We're completely range bound. We just have to wait and see how it goes. But just know there is a risk to the downside. That's still a possibility thanks to the head and shoulders. Unless we break 452, then I'm going to turn bullish, guys. So watch it very carefully. We'll see what the market makers try. I can't really predict this part. It depends on what they're going to try because of these options. Will they bring us closer to max pain, or are they going to break the bears even more? We'll just have to wait and see. The QQQ is basically the same. We have a head and shoulders like pattern. If we turn bullish, you want to break 388 and start breaking up. We have some tight resistance between 388 and 390. If we're bearish, you want to see it lose 382. We're starting to reject off this resistance. We're also range bound between 386 and 383.5. So if we're bullish, you want to see 386 break and then 388, break that level as well. If we're bearish, you want to see it lose 382. With this, head and shoulders like pattern, you can even interpret this as like an inverse cup and handle. There is a risk to the downside. It's a possibility, but we just want to wait and see if we could lose 382 to turn bearish. Otherwise, I think the market's going to be range bound. Nvda, it started off kind of weak, and then we got a very, very nice bounce on it. It started pushing quite nicely, but we're going to be watching this resistance. Nvidia could try to push a little higher, depending on if we can try to get above and open above 495. If we do push a bit more, since we got a nice push throughout the day, we're going to be watching this resistance between 498 and 500. We have this imbalance up here that could try to fill technically. So if we break 500, we turn bullish. This thing could start launching for 504 plus. If we just break out a little bit, I don't know if it's going to be a small break or like a medium-sized one, and we reject again, just like how we rejected yesterday. If we push up during the pre-market and reject, it's going to turn bearish. We're going to be expecting this thing to retest 495. If that fails us, it's going to come down to 490. So I think it might try to pop a bit more. We'll see if this rejects or not. This is actually in the middle for me, so I don't know for sure. And I think the overall market could affect this because of all the options expiring. For something else, such as we also have Apple, it's going to be the last one I talk about on TradingView. On Apple stock, we're in the middle. We have this nice bullish structure that's still developing. We're going to be watching to see if this quadruple bearish divergence plays out. If we're bullish, you want to see it get above 191. If we're bearish, you want to see it lose 188. It's looking kind of flat right now. It actually pumped a bit and failed, and it's just been trading sideways. If we lose the support, watch 188. We got to hold that, or else we're going to turn bearish. We'll be watching this very, very carefully as time goes on. Going back here onto Apple stock, I think it's very important to watch resistance, and we will see if this fails or not. We have a potential doji forming on the daily. We'll see if this leads to a sell-off or not. If we sell off and start to fill this gap down to 188, that could be a bearish signal. We'll just have to wait and see if this leads to a reversal or not. So just want to be very patient. No confirmation is here yet, so watch your levels. Now, one thing that's looking a bit weaker is going to be, excuse me, sorry guys, the daily chart on the IWM. This has a bearish structure because we have a bearish looking daily close, and also on the 4-hour time frame returning a bit more bearish. So the best thing I could tell you is this looks bearish in my opinion. So if you want to be bullish, you want to see it break above 178. If you're bearish, you want to see it lose 173.5 and sink to 172.8 to fill this imbalance. This is favoring the bears a little bit more, so I think that the odds favor some more selling. For SoFi, it looks like it may test 6.5 to make an attempt to bounce. We're going to be watching 6.5, see if the buyers defend there or not. If they fail, 6.25 is next. Microsoft has a quadruple bearish divergence that's in the process of developing, but as of right now, it's holding up. There's been no reason for it to tank just yet. If it pumps more, watch for 380, 377.5 to 380, then a rejection, or it could reject from here off the bearish divergence. As of right now, it looks bullish, so it could push a little bit more, but watch for a top to be forming very soon. AMD has a head and shoulders like pattern that is developing. If this ends up playing out, there could be a big rejection coming. We could see the market slow down, causing Nvda, or not Nvda, AMD to slow down with it. So we have a head and shoulders like pattern. If it breaks 122, turn bullish, it's going to break out to 124. If we lose 118, we're going to be turned bearish, and we're going to sink towards 114. Watch this range very carefully. There's a head and shoulders, so you want to be very patient just to wait and see. And then for a couple of others out there, the VIX has a nice inverse head and shoulders like pattern developing on the smaller time frames. Bullish divergence, it looks a bit more bullish. It looks like the VIX wants to push higher, which could slow the market down. But just to be safe, there could be manipulation, so you never know how this could always play out. We have a nice inverse head and shoulders on the 30 minutes time frame, suggesting this may have some upside. So there's some risk for downside for the markets. The SQQQ has the same thing. SQQQ actually has a potential inverse head and shoulders right here, but there's also like a head and shoulders here. So maybe it drops a bit and tries to bounce. We'll see if this thing could try to break 16.6 or not. The dollar is looking very flat right now. We'll see which way this breaks. We'll see if we can make any move, but right now it's just not really doing too much. For Coinbase, if we're bullish, you want to see it break above 98. If you're bearish, you want to see it lose 94 to sink towards 92.5. As of right now, it's on a slight downtrend. So you're going to be watching to see if it could lose support. On Google, you're going to be watching this wedge right here. We have a bullish wedge. If we're bullish, we break 139, watch for 140, then a potential rejection. If we're bearish, you want to see it break down towards 135. So we're going to be watching this to see if this thing breaks down or not. Watch for that 140 resistance. Maybe we pop and then reject. It looks like it could try to push a little higher, but we'll just have to wait and see. Finally, for Amazon, we're looking a little bit more bearish than the market. Right now it's still selling off a bit, so watch for 141.25 as support. On the 30 minutes time frame, we're going to be watching this. There's a possible head and shoulders right here that could be developing, which suggests that there's going to be a risk of downside. So we might see Amazon come down towards 139. So it does favor that, but just to be safe, we'll have to wait and see. On Meta, we have something very similar developing. There's a possible head and shoulders right here. If we're bullish, you want to see it break out towards, it has to try to get above like 138, and that's going to turn bullish. And it has to try to break, did I say one? I mean 338, and it has to try to break that, then break 340. And if we're bearish, you want to see it lose basically 328. If we lose this, it's going to start sinking lower. Now, with the head and shoulders, I would be very careful when trying to trade this and watch this. So we'll see how this thing looks. Look for the setup very carefully, and we'll be very patient as time goes on. Anyways, guys, that's it for this one. Thank you all so much for listening. I know my prediction on SPY was just like, I was talking about both possibilities more on SPY than the other tickers. That's because it depends on market makers and which level we break from. The market has a head and shoulders that could play out. We're going to be watching to see if we invalidate this and try to break resistance. So just watch which way we break and just be as patient as possible. All right. So for Tesla, we're looking relatively weak. We'll see how Tesla moves as well. Make sure you watch that 200 EMA on the daily and also on the 4-hour time frame, and we will see if Tesla breaks or not. Just know that there is some risk to it because it's looking relatively weak. All right, that's it for now. Thank you for listening. Have a great day. Remain calm, cool, and collected. And I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Thank you again, and peace out.